I am Michelle Lott. I'm the principal and founder of Lean RAQA. We specialize in helping primarily startups and small to mid-size companies navigate their regulatory and quality compliance. So I have been in regulatory and quality for over 10 years. I did serve a term on the FDA's Good Manufacturing Practices Advisory Committee. And then I make a joke that I'm a master grief counselor because everybody gets upset that there are regulations. This is my executive team. At present, they're playing in puppy wrestle deathmatch on the other side of my desk, so I apologize for any extraneous noises or distractions. So today we're going to go through the facts of the QMSR, what's in a name anyways. So we're going to talk about differences in interpretation. We'll go through all the burning questions and then secrets to success. So if you look at the historical timelines associated with the QMSR, for a long time, the QMSR stayed unchanged between 1996 and to the present. 1996 was when they issued design controls and a few other things into the GMPs, or good manufacturing practices. That same year was when ISO 13485 was published. And it has been updated a few times since the original release in 1996. And the most recent is the 2016 version that was updated. And then right after that, they also released a practical guide to help you interpret the 2016 version. Now, what's funny is that the 2016 ISO standard is like 28 pages, and the practical guide to help you understand the 2016 28 pages is 228 pages of context around it. So, and then today we've got it where they all came together. And so, so finally where the parallel lines have eventually converged here. And then, but at the same time, you've got 14971 that is moving in parallel and still in parallel because it is not going to be codified. So why did the FDA do it now? Well, they did it to eliminate the redundancy and inefficiency of having multiple standards that you have to be compliant to. And I think that this is funny. They think that it's going to save medical device companies at least $439 million over the next decade. So I don't see how this is going to be that big of a savings, because actually it's going to get quite complex, as we're going to see in a minute here. So the QMSR was published on February 2nd of this year. And, you know, on the surface, it seems like it's going to be like teaching an old dog new tricks with the FDA, because the ISO and the ISO audit approach are entirely different than the QSIT, or the standard FDA inspection model. But is it really going to be like teaching an old dog new tricks? Because thanks to COVID, we've had like a 50% turnover in the agency. And their thinking is constantly evolving. And I know an inspector for some that's out of the Phoenix office here in Arizona, and he's inspected several of my local clients. And I asked him when the draft came out for the QMSR, you know, what was his plan? Because he's been at the agency, you know, nearly 30 years, and he's like, oh, I'm going to retire as soon as that comes out. So I think we're going to see even more turnover at the agency. So you know, it may be that the people at the FDA are going to get to be, you know, not even know the original QSR or QSIT. They'll just be new people that were trained to the QMSR and whatever inspection methodology they come up with. So if think back to that history of the QSR that has evolved into the QMSR, it was always all about the preamble. The preamble was the original comments to the QSR. They were over 70 pages of, quote, recommendations. And they were what the FDA continued to go back to every time they needed to say, oh, well, when we said this, we really meant that. So even though the preamble was not codified, it reflected their current thinking. So essentially, FDA was waiting on the ISO regulation to evolve into what they were already thinking and articulating in the preamble. So how elaborate does this does a compliant QMS need to be? Well, it should be based on the risk of the device, the complexity of the device and the manufacturing process, and ideally the size and complexity of your organization. But if we look at the comments in the QMSR, there are two that really stand out. And those are that they are, while they're not codifying 14971 or any of the other standards referenced in the QMSR or the notes referenced in the QMSR, both of these things are needed to understand the provisions of the QMSR and what the FDA meant to say. So there's like two halves to the whole, and that the QMSR is made up of an acknowledgement of ISO 1345 and the definitions from ISO 9000. And both of these as a whole make up the fundamental of the QSR. But if we go back to those comments, if we've got ISO 9001 to consider, ISO 1345 to consider, we know that when FDA is talking about risk, they specifically said, if you want to know what we're talking about for risk in the QMSR, you need to read 14971. And then they said, if you want to know what we meant when we adopted a particular section of the ISO standard, you need to have read the notes. So now we know from reading these comments, we've got 9001, 1345, 14971, and the notes. But so now if we look at the understanding and concept of risk in the 21 CFR 820 and the preamble, we have a single instant of the word risk in the actual QSR and 36 references to risk in the preamble. So again, FDA kept going back to the preamble at the time saying, oh, that one time we said risk in the regulation, we really meant all of these things. And they meant it not just about risk in product development, but in also your quality system. So what does ISO have to say about risk? Well, ISO mentions it 32 times in the 2016 version, but most notably is where it talks about a risk-based approach for how you control your quality management system. So, but now we still have risk being mentioned more in the preamble and the QSR than in ISO. So if we now look at how this pie is evolving, because now we need to go and refer to the practical guide, because the practical guide, like we talked about earlier, is the context in which you should interpret 13485. So now we've got 9000, 1345, 14971 notes and the practical guide that you need to understand the QMSR. So if we look at the concept of risk, Risk is mentioned 246 times in the practical guide compared to that 32 times in 13485. And this is fairly significant because, like I said, the practical guide is 228 pages. So they are talking about risk more than once per page. So again, you've really got a perspective of where the FDA is going and their understanding and expectations around risk management, and your quality management system, not just product development and product design. So if you compare so now we've got a perspective about the 21 CFR 820 and preamble and the combination of the practical guide and 13485 and what it means for your risk-based approach. So now if we're looking at the big picture, we've got to look at the comments to the QMSR as well, because these are the new preamble to the original QSR. So I think the actual QMSR, the actual regulation now, is only a handful of pages, but if you count the comments, it's over 100 pages. So, and those are critical to understanding the FDA's decisions, interpretations of the QMSR itself. So this chart is from the FDA. They say that these are all the similarities and that they're harmonizing these former subsections of the QSR into these clauses with 13485. One of the comments that I thought was particularly funny was that they said that the FDA did not think it was worthwhile to map the comparison of CFR Part 820 to 1345-2016. They didn't think it was a worthwhile exercise, except for that in 2017, they committed FDA resources to sitting on an AMI committee to put together a white paper that maps the 820 to the 1345. So be mindful of this and go get it, because the FDA did participate in this back in the day. So this is where to find the actual map. So, but unfortunately, your search for the Holy Grail still continues, because compliance with ISO 1345 does not mean you will fulfill the QMSR, because there are some significant differences. And so now if we look at how elaborate does that QMS need to be, it's going to need to be significantly more elaborate than it had to be underneath the QSR alone. Because in the bigger picture, the devil's in the details, because not only now do we have to consider all of those other things just to understand the context of the QMSR, we also have to understand the differences. So the main differences are around the electronic signature requirements, the complaint monitoring, UDIs, and then there are a few others. But we're going to delve into the differences and interpretations specifically discussed in the comments. So what's in a name anyways? Well, there are some significant differences in interpretation, and the biggest ones are around the concept of the device master record versus the medical device file, and the concept of safety and performance versus safety and efficacy. So in terms of the device master record, the FDA said that they feel that the concept of the medical device file will not be overly burdensome. And so they're going to adopt that in lieu of the device master record. And they're also going to let go of the requirements for the design history file, device master record, and the concept of the device history record. So on the surface, if you read 13485 alone, the concept of MDF does not appear to be overly burdensome, because really the main difference is the addition of including the intended use in the MDF document. But like we talked about, you need to understand the concepts that are embodied in the practical guide. Well, in that case, that you also need to consider all of these things in the contents for your medical device plus some. So it gets really lengthy and can be really tedious to develop a medical device file, depending on how deep you go into the interpretation of the practical guide. So the other key difference is the concept of performance versus efficacy. Efficacy is in the original FD&C Act. And if you look up the Webster's definition for effectiveness, it's about producing a decisive, decisive, and desired effect, whereas performance is just at the fulfillment of a claim or an execution. But the FDA says that the word performance encompasses the concept of being effective as well, and that manufacturers are not relieved of the burden to prove that they are both safe and can perform and safe and effective. So more semantics is they are replacing the term establish in 820 with the concept of document in 13485, because they said that document, it's implied that it is implemented and maintained. So another interesting change is that they have adopted and added the concept of customer in the scope of their definitions. And so they're adopting the definition from ISO 9000 for customer, and it's which makes you think just like you know, you're a consumer, a client, an end user, a retailer. So you're purchasing a good or a service from somebody. That seems perfectly logical, right? But they put a spin on it, FDA did, in that when they are using the term customer property, they're using it to mean that manufacturers must comply to ensure the safety and effectiveness of the devices being manufactured. So then they go on to give an example that I had me and 4 other people on my team scratching our heads about what did they even mean here. And when because their example says, for example, a manufacturer is expected to ensure that the integrity of a component provided by a contract manufacturer is not compromised before it is incorporated into the device being manufactured. Well, to me, your contract manufacturer is your supplier, and you control them from your supplier controls procedures, and you control the product through your incoming receiving procedures through verification of purchased product. So I still have not figured out this one and what it meant and what. So it's like your customer is your supplier is your customer, you're the customer, it's just kind of a little confusing mess. So they also let go of the wording management with executive responsibility, because they said that the concept of top management discussed in ISO 13485 embodies the same concept. And they said that top management is responsible for ensuring this culture of quality by demonstrating behaviors, attitudes, activities, and processes that are going to support the quality management system and the product or service provided. Well, the problem with that is, you know, most of you are probably familiar with Dilbert and his boss. So the pointy-haired boss you know, to me encompasses the idea of management with executive responsibility. And I guarantee you, like Dilbert, he's going to put the top management hat on Dilbert. And Dilbert will be the one to go down with the ship on that one. So this one is also significant. It is the term correction. FDA has adopted the concept of both the ISO concept of correction, corrective action, and preventive action, all three. So now when they say correction, you have to be very specific. Are you talking internal, like your scrap, your rework, internal nonconformities? Or are you talking field correction per 21 CFR Part 806? So just be mindful of that. Your procedures need to address this. And when you are taking a correction, you need to be very specific about, was it external field correction or was the product still within your control? So the FDA is maintaining the definition of labeling per the FD&C Act. But interestingly enough, they are not going to suggest a definition for marketing, because they say that a separate definition for marketing is unnecessary because it's not addressed in ISO 13485. Well, just because ISO 13485 doesn't address it now doesn't mean it shouldn't have. So I think that this was a miss for the scope of this QMSR. So we have other definitions that are now missing in action. They are not going to include process validation or design validation, because they say that the concepts embodied in 13485 imply process validation and design and development. So it's really important to understand the concept and intent behind the sections of 13485. So again, you know, I'm going to refer you back to the practical guide to get more concepts and understanding in these areas where they're not clearly articulated anymore. It's not all bad news. So one interesting thing, they did not continue with the concept of an independent design reviewer. So you don't have to have that independent third party anymore, or independent party. For the manufacturers who already have an ISO certification and are distributing outside of the US, this likely will make your life easier. And because these are now regulations, the ISO 1345 and 9000 are available in view-only, read-only versions for free. But FDA says that they realize they have a lot of work to do to align the rest of the policies, procedures, regulations, guidances to be consistent with the new QMSR. So just over the next years, you know, be prepared that you're going to get a lot of changes to these documents in the ecosystem around the QMSR. So now let's jump into the most burning of the questions. So because there are many, and we're just going to scratch the surface here, but these are the lowest hanging fruit. In fact, these are probably the fruit that's already laying just right on the ground. So will FDA accept ISO 13485 certifications in lieu of audits? Oh, I'm sorry, Sean, I got in my groove. Do you want to do a poll question? Okay, I'll keep going. So will FDA accept ISO 13485 certifications in lieu of audits? So no, the FDA is not recognizing ISO 13485 certifications. They are a part of the medical device single audit program, which is based on 13485. And for those of you who don't know, they accept the MDSAP audit reports, and they audit the audit report. They're not like Health Canada, who accepts just the certificate. So, but even if you don't get a MDSAP certificate or a ISO 13485, you are not, you don't have to seek certification, but you do still have to modify your QMS to comply with 13485. So the intended timeline, the rule is effective 2 years after publication. So we're looking at February 2nd of 2026, that it will be mandatory, and the FDA plans to do a hard stop on the QSIT or QSR inspections and switch to whatever their new methodology will be. So I'll pause just a minute and let you guys answer the poll question. So this next one is really interesting to me. So the FDA is now, they can inspect management review, internal audit, and supplier audit records. So there are no more exemptions. So make sure that you verify the completeness of your management review agenda, including risk management, because 14971 requires that your risk management process and procedures be evaluated. Now, you don't necessarily have to do that in management review, but that's just where I put it for the ease of making sure it gets done timely. So there are no more exemptions. So these are, you know, traditionally these can tend to be pencil whip activities sometimes. So, but now the FDA can really dig in. So it's a fine line, because you want to make sure that these are value add activities, but you also don't necessarily want the FDA inspecting them all. And they said the reason why they made this change was because it shouldn't be a big deal, because all the other regulatory jurisdictions have got the right and access to it. So the FDA should be able to have the same access. So again, under the QSR, FDA typically did not have visibility to some of these records, but now they have visibility to everything. Yep. And so here they say they don't think that this is a big deal. Again, because they're already being made available in the regular course of business to other jurisdictions. So what happens if ISO 13485 is revised? So now that FDA has incorporated ISO 13485, they specifically said that any future changes would not be automatically adopted, but would have to be evaluated in and of themselves to make sure whether or not the QMSR should be amended. So what does this mean for our harmonization? Well, here we are now. We finally, the parallel lines came together, but it means that, every 3 years they look at ISO to decide if they need to revise it or not. So it means that this could very easily, get deharmonized, just as long as it quicker than it took it to get harmonized. So now you also have things that are a requirement that were not a requirement underneath the QSR. Give you a second for this poll.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that we got this in when we were still talking about the ISOs.
Yep. So now things like quality manuals are a requirement, and they were not a requirement underneath the QSR. So, you know, at minimum, this is a whole new procedure that you will need if you don't already have a quality manual. So what about QSIP, or the quality system inspection technique? Well, the FDA has not published or announced their intent with they have not published or announced their intent with their audit methodology. However, it's highly likely that they're going to adopt something very similar to the MDSAP task-based audit model, compared to the QSIP, which is more of a system perspective. Now, to me, I think that the QSIP audit methodology is much more meaningful than the task-based or checklist-based audit. So I'm really curious how this is going to change both the process and the expectations, and how the FDA is going to move through their audits now. So hopefully we have answered the bulk of the burning questions, and now we can talk about some secrets to success. Sean, do you have any other questions you want to put up?
I have one last poll question, if I can go ahead and figure out how to do that without.
Yes.
There were a few questions that were shared in the Q&A. One that you may be able to address. Will the risk management file replace memo letter to file?
No, a letter to file is a whole separate process that you have to go through. There's a particular FDA guidance that has got some flow charts in it, and based off of what change that you're making, that's you will write a letter to file if the change that you're making doesn't require you to make a new submission.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Share the results. 54% yes. There we go. Stop sharing. Back to you.
Okay. So here's some secrets to success. So the QMSR, you really need to understand the QMSR comments, because again, that is the new preamble. So that is what the FDA meant when they adopted the QMSR and ISO 1345. I also personally feel the practical guide is essential, because that's how you're going to understand the 1345 and everything that they didn't say but meant to. Be proactive. 2 years is right around the corner. You not only need a runway for the transition of your procedures, but you need time to get your, start creating records underneath your new procedures, so that you've got some compliant records that are available to be audited when they get done. So once you transition your procedures, I recommend a mock audit to make sure that you didn't miss anything, and that your records and procedures or transition is complete. So again, my hypothesis is that they're going to adopt the MDSAP audit model. So, get yourself familiar with that and comfortable and being inspected underneath that audit methodology. At the very minimum, you're going to need to update your quality manual, your management review procedures, your monitoring and measuring of your process controls, design and development records, your CAPA non-conforming product. And one of the biggest things is just the alignment of the definitions. I think that is that aligning to the definitions, but also the concepts that are changing is going to be a key to being successful underneath the QMSR. So we are working on a cheat sheet that is, if you are US only, these are the things that you need to do, versus if you are already 13485 compliant, these are the things that you need to, that you're going to need to align, particularly around the definitions. So just shoot us an email if you want a copy of that. So I have a lot of downloads and tools available on my website. So be sure that you check these out. And then let me know how I can help. I can I can help you transition your procedures. I can help you with your mock audits, and we also have fractional quality services where we can be essentially your outsourced quality team.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. We have a few other questions that we should be able to knock out relatively easily. When does the QMSR come into effect in the US?
February of 2026.
That's when it will be required.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does the FDA mandate clinical evaluations for all medical devices entering the US market under the new QMSR, similar to EU MDR and CER?
No, they have not changed anything about how they classify or regulate product and what products do or do not need clinical trials.
And then the next question, we are based in Europe and are ISO 13485 certified. Would that be beneficial if we want to launch in the US under QMSR? How big is the gap?
Yep. There is the biggest gaps are the ones that we went over here, but I think the biggest thing is to get that alignment on definitions, and then also the reporting is probably going to be the biggest significance that you might not already have in your quality management system.
What happens if you transition your procedures, then you have an inspection by the FDA under QSR?
Well, the FDA will tell you that the ISO 13485 is already kind of reflects their thinking about how quality management systems should be regulated. So by being compliant with the QMSR, you won't be out of compliance with the QSR.
Right. Good, I understand. This is an interesting question. Lots of companies just underwent MDR transitions. Does this just add to the continued wave of regulatory changes that companies are overwhelmed with, or is it much ado about nothing?
I think it definitely adds to the conundrum of what to comply with, when do you need to comply with it, and you know that those pieces of the pie that I had that just kind of went around and around, that's just to understand the QMSR. You know, once you get into these global regulations, you know, you could add another piece for the MDR, you could add another piece for Brazil, you could add another piece for the more geographies that you're in, the more complicated it gets.
Yeah, I saw a question about MDSAP, and what the alignment with that was going to be. I think that's what I saw.
Yeah, I think that that's going to be that if the FDA doesn't adopt MDSAP audit model directly, that it will be very similar to MDSAP.
Mm-hmm. I don't understand this question. Perhaps you do. Can we still use DMR, DHR, and DHF terms if we want? I don't know what that means.
I'm sure you can. So those are the kind of file types that the FDA is letting go of those concepts. You can use those words because FDA says that they didn't need those words because the concepts are already embodied within the 1345. So I'm sure you can call it whatever you want, as long as you define also what a medical device file is and how you're compliant with the new requirements.
Okay. I would say that there's going to be a short survey at the end of the thing, so it should pop up on your screen. Let's see if we have more questions. So you already answered this question in a way. For a product that is intended to be certified during the transition period, can we straightly aim at the QMSR? The answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
That one does not negate the other, it enhances. And
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that does any consultancy need to be certified further? Our consultancy was just certified for 13485. Is there any other?
The QMSR only regulates products and services that meet the definition of a medical device.
Understood. Do you have to follow their definitions, or can you also sharply define your own definitions as well? Not clear what that means.
You can probably add to, but you can't take away from.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's what we talk about recommendations. Are they really recommendations? You know, if the FDA is recommending it, you should do it.
Right.
Okay, well, that looks like it for the questions. Angel, do you have anything that you would like to add as we close before we go to the survey?
Yeah, I think that Michelle has summarized very well all the requirements. We have 2 years for getting ready for that. Obviously, the date is just around the corner, so as soon as you can cope with everything, the better for anyone, right? So I know that Michelle, I have a question because I think that the FDA has also to modify or amend documents related to that are not in the regulation, but they're part of the system, right? So do you know when are they going to change the documents? Do they have a plan?
They do not have a plan, and I will tell you this. I'm the US agent for several companies, and they were working on a contract, and they're like, oh, hey, we just need you to say that your scope of your US agent includes these things. And I'm like, no, per the FDA website, it includes these other things, but not those things. They got that from a regulation that the FDA has not taken off the books, but they have another regulation that said that regulation doesn't apply anymore. So, and that's from like way over 10 years ago. So who knows when they're going to get around to it.
Okay.
I would just like to remind everybody that the slides and the recording will be shared within 24 hours via email to all registered participants. Additionally, you know, a number of us will be posting the recording to our YouTube channels or our websites, so you know you can look for it there. And I think that's it. Yes, thank you both very much for your participation. If you have any follow-up questions, you know, please reach out to Scilife or Michelle, and we're going to sign off. Thank you all for your participation. Stay tuned for the survey.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Bye.